War has broken out in Ukraine, and that can feel very destabilizing to the whole planet and to each one of us, especially when it comes right after a couple of years of the COVID pandemic and all of the energy turmoil that caused. But after watching this video, you'll get a better understanding of what's going on spiritually behind the scenes in Ukraine, and also what you can do to assist the planet in transitioning into an era of more peace and stability. You'll learn the spiritual understanding of what's going on in Ukraine right now, the top reason why the planet feels so unstable right now, and then I'll share 3 powerful tips that you can use to help you remain strong and stable, and that will also assist in calming the situation in Ukraine. Coming up. Hello, beautiful soul. This is Christina Lopes, the Heart Alchemist. Welcome to this video. So what is happening right now on the planet? Let's get into that first. What's happening right now is that there has been a major shift into what's known as the Age of Aquarius, okay? I've been talking about this in previous videos, and it's very pertinent right now with the war in Ukraine to understand what this Age of Aquarius is doing, what these new energies are doing on the planet. This new Age of Aquarius has basically pushed the energy on the planet to heights that it's never been in before. That means that this planet is being bathed with concentrations of light that have never happened before. So just to give you an idea, the planet used to be bathed with light. It would evolve, it would ascend in a more linear, slower way in lifetimes before. We used to come down here and it would take multiple lifetimes for us to evolve in a slower pace, the energy moving more slowly. Now in the Age of Aquarius, in these last couple of years, maybe last 3-4 years, what's ended up happening is that the energy on the planet has shifted dramatically, very quickly. The energy shifted so quickly that in these 3-4 years, an entire planetary grid, energy grid, has been born, and all of this very quickly compared to what used to happen before. And so as soon as the planet is bathed with this amount of life, with this huge concentration of light, one of the consequences of that is that the planet being bathed with that amount of light can cause temporary chaos or a little bit of tumultuous movement in energy, okay? And it can cause chaos because as the light is coming into the planet, more light means that there is less shadow, okay? And so what ends up happening is now there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere for shadow to hide. Everything is being seen. And we've noticed this on the planet more and more, that as the light comes in, there's no way for the shadow to hide anymore. And so this means that things that used to be obscured, that things that used to be in the dark, that things that we didn't used to notice, problems in our systems, problems in our governments, problems in our structures, in the very fabric of reality, what's known as the 3D matrix, all of the shenanigans that used to happen in the 3D matrix are being seen because more light is coming onto the planet, okay? So that's one of the reasons why you can see this kind of chaos and a little bit of tumultuous energy whenever enormous amounts of light hit the planet. Now let's get into this whole idea of shadow and where it has nowhere to hide now with higher concentrations of light, okay? So this planet, this reality that we've incarnated in, has always been a play between light and dark, okay? Now notice I don't use the word war, I use the word play, because my guides have always been very clear in telling me that there is no such thing as a war. There is no war going on in the spirit world, that wars only happen in the human mind. And so this is what my guides have been telling me, but this play on light and dark can create wars and it can create conflict down here in the human form because that's the mental construct that humans have. And so the way that this play of light and dark has been playing out on the planet is that there's been a certain percentage of light, but then there's always been things hiding away from the glance of the light. And in those things, wherever there are things hiding, they can fester. And so wherever there's darkness festering, there's manipulation, there's control, there's a lot of power structures, there's injustice, there's a lot of things going on with the play of light and dark. The example that I like to give is if you walk into a cave, all right? Let's say you walk into a really, really dark cave and then suddenly you turn on the flashlight. Okay. As soon as you turn on a flashlight in a really dark cave, you were probably walking in there. You didn't know, you thought you were all by yourself. And then suddenly you start to flash the flashlight and you start to notice that there are all kinds of critters. There may be cockroaches, there may be snakes, there may be bats, there may be all kinds of things in that darkness. You just didn't know because you couldn't see. But as soon as you turn on the flashlight, suddenly all the critters start to scramble because the light is intense to them and they're trying to hide from it. Okay, that's the example that I like to give of what the shadow realms are doing right now. They were very used to living in the darkness, meaning that they were feeding off of fear and off of lower vibration energies. And so the dark realms would fester in this darkness, but now that the light is concentrating more, there's nowhere to hide because there is no darkness. So the play of light and dark on the planet used to be more balanced. Now the light is dominating. And so basically, and it's going to continue to dominate, whereas the shadow is going to disappear altogether. And that's essentially what's happening energetically. There's this light coming in that's now dominating, meaning that there is no way for the unseen, there's no way for darkness to fester anymore. Now, why is this play on light and dark important to understand? It's important to understand because you can now start to see why so much instability can happen during moments of great transitions on the planet. Whenever these big transitions occur, especially when they occur at this speed that they're occurring right now, they start to rattle the foundations of what's known as the 3D matrix. They start to rattle those foundations, and things and energies that were feeding off of fear and that were here feeding off of lower vibrational energies have nowhere to hide anymore. So they can initially try and cause instability to bring our vibration down to what it used to be, which doesn't work, okay? I want to leave you a little bit of a reminder here. As I'm talking about the play of light and dark, I don't want you to fear shadow. Okay, so we've all been very programmed by Hollywood and religion and movies and all kinds of things to fear the dark and to just be deathly afraid of hell and the devil and demons and all of these different things. But you have nothing to worry about in terms of the shadow. The shadow has no power over you unless you give power. Okay, so the shadow really is just a lack of light. It's a lack of seeing. It's a lack of awareness. That's all it is. And so there's nothing for you to fear. So I wanted to leave you this reminder here, okay? So ding, ding, reminder, there is nothing for you to fear when it comes to the shadow, all right? I wanted to insert this reminder here as I'm talking about light and dark because sometimes people can start to feel afraid, okay? So what does this play have to do with what's going on in Ukraine right now? Well, as soon as light comes in and it starts to destabilize the old 3D matrix that was built kind of in a pyramid structure where there was a lot of power at the top and everybody at the bottom was just festering around following the leaders at the top. And so there was this very hard pyramid structure of power and control and greed over the planet. Now those structures are falling apart. But like I was saying, temporarily, when light enters the planet and we're moving up in energy, temporarily there can be a little bit of chaos because the shadow realms are trying to manipulate reality to see if we stay in lower vibrations. It won't work, it's not working, but it can create temporary problems. One of the issues that it's creating right now is that when the energy is this destabilized and it's moving into higher energy of more love, more peace, more stability, it can actually rattle the very people and structures that were living off of the fear-based structures of the 3D matrix in the past, okay? And this brings us to Ukraine. So any kind of authoritarian dictator figure, any kind of power structure where people don't have choice and there's just a commander at the top and there's a lot of authoritarianism, there's a lot of dictator energy, there's a lack of democracy, And any kind of figures like that, figures that are in power, that want to control others, that don't want others to have freedom, those are going to be the leaders or the figures that shadow concentrates on more. And so those people are going to become destabilized in this energy because their old tricks aren't working anymore, but they can create temporary problems. And that's what's happening in Ukraine right now. So leaders like Vladimir Putin and any dictator that's on the planet right now, any authoritarian that's on the planet right now, their time is ending. And their time is ending because the new structure on the planet does not cultivate the energies that used to be here when the 3D matrix was dominating. But as I was saying, temporarily, as these figures are exiting from the world stage, they can create a lot of problems, especially if they are being influenced by shadow energies. Okay, so it's very, very clear for you to think about it this way, that wherever there are old power structures that do not involve freedom for everyone, those power structures and those figures, those authority figures or structures are being completely dissolved in this new reality. But during the dissolution of this, there's going to be a little bit of chaos and a little bit of tumultuous energy. And from a spiritual perspective, it's easy to understand why these power structures or why these old authoritarian figures are the ones that are being influenced by the shadow realms more. It's because these figures or these systems are put in place to control others, to have power over others. And so that's the prime influence of shadow, because shadow wants to maintain everyone down in fear. The shadow realms or the dark, they feed off of fear. Okay, and the evolution of the planet is going more towards unconditional love. Well, shadow realms have nothing to eat anymore. There's no fear. The fear is decreasing on the planet, and so they resort to more and more kind of desperate measures to try and keep the vibration of the planet low. It's not working, but temporarily it can be destabilizing, as you're seeing what's happening in Ukraine right now. So basically, the shadow realms will continue to interfere with any power structure, and it doesn't just have to be in countries that don't have democracies. Even in countries with democracies, as long as they have old power structures that are built on the manipulation and control over others, that's all dissolving. But of course, the more tension is being created in systems and political systems and in leaders that are non-democratic, because they're the ones that are holding more concentrated power and taking away freedoms from others. Okay, so those figures are going to be attempted to be manipulated by shadow. There's going to be more shadow interference in with those leaders and those systems. Okay, and that's what's happening right now in Ukraine and Russia. A lot of people. It's not the chaos isn't just in Ukraine. Millions and millions of people, millions and millions of Russians are also suffering because of all of the severe sanctions and everything that's happening there. So these are millions and millions of people that are being controlled by a couple of pawns at the top of the pyramid that feed off of control and power over others. And it's been very difficult for them to be phased out of the planetary energy. They are being phased out, but it's been very difficult for that to happen. And it can cause some tumultuous energy and a little bit of chaos as that is happening. But you don't need to fear, because even though these situations of war and chaos on the planet, they are painful, and they are painful especially for the people that are going through them right now. And I send so much love and support for anyone that's being affected by this war right now. The good news, or the kind of light at the end of the tunnel, is that what's happening in these situations, this is basically the last hurrah of these old power structures. It's almost like a supernova. So a supernova is a star that's exploding at the end of its life, and that's another good example of what happens to these authoritarian figures that have been controlling the planet for so long. They're going out too. They're exploding like a supernova, but the supernova is an explosion that can create a lot of damage. It's very big. And so I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is that these authoritarian figures and these authoritarian systems that were a part of the 3D matrix before, they are being dissolved and giving way to more light on the planet. But we need a lot of patience to get through this temporary tumultuous phase. One way for us to very clearly see when there's shadow or dark influence around any kind of structure that's coming down is by the behavior of the people in those systems. systems. Okay, so using the example of Putin, if you look at Putin and the leadership in Russia right now that are kind of waging war in Ukraine, if you look at the leadership, you start to notice that the leaders become irrational. They start to become delusional, so they tell themselves stories of how the world is supposed to be, and they can't get out of those delusional stories. They become very erratic. They can become very, very dangerous, as we see in what's happening in Ukraine right now. And as soon as this starts to happen, they can become desperate to hold on to power. As soon as you see a leader that is desperate to hold on to power to a point where they will actually wage a war, you're starting to see that person is being influenced by other things other than love and light, okay? And so that's when you can spot that very, very clearly, and it's happening here right now. And so the best thing that we can do, aside from, I'm going to get into, some tips on how to help in this situation, but from within us, one of the most important things that we could do as light workers on the planet, as we're working to bring more light and to phase out all of the 3D matrix structures and leaders that were here, authoritarian leaders that were here that did not represent freedom of choice and that pushed others down or took advantage of other people. Those leaders and those systems are being phased out. And we as light workers, we must hold our vibration really, really high and not dip into the duality that war causes. War causes a lot of duality, a lot of polarity, a lot of extremes. And it's important for us as light workers to hold ourselves above the fray of that chaotic energy. On to part 2 of the video, what to do. Okay, so now that we've gone over kind of the spiritual energies, what's going on behind the scenes, what happens behind the scenes, not just in this war in Ukraine, but in any war really, what's going on behind the scenes and what are the spiritual energies that are influencing these events and the events of conflict and war. Now that we know a bit more about that, let's get into some practical tips on what you can do to not only help yourself hold that vibration as a light worker, but also help others that are going through, that are specifically in these conflict zones, okay? So tip number 1 is 3D help. Okay, so what I mean by 3D help is help in the actual physical world. Okay, so when we refer to 3D reality, we're referring to the reality that we can see and touch and feel. It's the reality, as I was saying, talking about the 3D matrix, it's a reality that we're exiting from also because we're going more up into what's known as 5D. But in this specific moment, I'm talking about 3D in the sense of things that you can actually physically touch and see and feel. Okay. And what I mean by 3D help is a lot of times when light workers and spiritual people, when a conflict breaks out in the world, a lot of times what ends up happening is the first thing a spiritual person will do is they'll go sit down on their meditation cushion, they'll say a little prayer, they'll meditate, and then they'll get up and go about their day. And that's wonderful. There's no judgment for that kind of practice. That's amazing, amazing to do that. But in this tip, sometimes what I'm talking about here is that a lot of spiritual people get stuck just in that more spiritual help, and they forget the 3D tangible help. And so for this tip, I'm talking about actual 3D help, meaning it's not something that you're just going to meditate on, it's something that you're going to actively engage in. So a good example is donating to causes, just donating some money to causes that are helping people on the ground right now, that are helping feed people, that are helping people. There are possible over 1 million refugees that are coming out of Ukraine right now to neighboring countries. So you can do your part to help donate for those organizations. If you don't have any place to donate, I'm a monthly patron of an organization called Together Rising. It's by the wonderful Glennon Doyle. So consider donating. It's an amazing organization, and they deploy things on the ground and use the money that you donate on the ground for the things that they're supporting. So they're doing a campaign for Ukraine. If you want to use another organization, just go on PayPal. PayPal has a list of charities, of reputable charities that are also working on the ground right now. So it can be through donation, through actually donating money. If you have that financial ability, that would be wonderful. Or it can be donating your time. So right now on on the ground, for example, Ukraine has a huge IT sector. And so since everybody's out of work, there are thousands and thousands of IT workers that are donating their time to keep the internet running in the Ukraine because it's being shut down, okay? And so there's a ton of IT workers working on that. This is just an example, but if you have a specific skill that you can help on the ground, deploy that skill, okay? So that's another thing. Or actively help in organizations that are putting together packages to send. If you don't have money, just donate your time and go help these packages, or collecting food, collecting clothes, anything that could be sent on the ground to help refugees and to help people that are victims of war. Okay, so 3D help. As spiritual people, the spiritual part is so important, but the everyday part is very, very important, and sometimes spiritual people forget about it. Tip number 2 is 5D help. Okay, so now we're going from 3D help to 5D help. So now this is where the spiritual practices come in. Okay, so the meditation, the prayer, that's wonderful. These are more spiritual practices, what's known as the 5D realm of consciousness. So this is a higher realm of consciousness, and this is where your spiritual practices come in. So for example, participate in group meditations that send that beautiful energy of love to Ukraine and to any war-torn zone area on the planet, okay? And so speaking of group meditation, I did a group meditation with people specifically to send loving energy to Ukraine. If you didn't participate in this live with us, I'm going to leave a link in the description box below of that meditation, of that YouTube live, and you could do the meditation now even afterwards. It still works, okay? So that's an example of a group meditation. But if you don't want to use that one, participate in any other group meditation, or do your own prayers and meditation at home, sending loving energy to the Ukraine, and to not only Ukraine, but also to Russian and the million of Russians that are also struggling under this problematic war. Okay, so that's one way. But another way too is to really just refuse to dip your vibration. So this is a personal one. This is really just you and you. It's holding your vibration no matter what is happening on the planet. And sometimes it's hard, especially if you're very close to a conflict, because the energy intensifies as you get geographically closer to a conflict. The energy intensifies and it can have more of an effect on you. But you are a light worker. Refuse to drop your vibration. Refuse to get into these dense energies of fear, because you're here to help hold that vibration, to help transition this planet from less light to more light. Okay, and you can only do that by holding your vibration. Wonderful ways to hold your vibration is to do these daily practices, to meditate, to sit with yourself, to call on your angels, and just do your spiritual practices every day so your vibration is untainted and it stays strong no matter what. Tip number 3 is to limit incoming information. This one is so important, okay? And it's another little quirk of what's known as the 3D matrix, okay? So the 3D matrix, or the 3D realm of reality that we are exiting, it feeds off of fear, okay? Never forget this. It feeds off of fear. And there are some mechanisms that have been helping this 3D matrix maintain its grip on reality. And one of those things is the media machine, what's known as the media machine, okay? So you probably know this. You see it everywhere you turn, but news is only negative news. News is only bad. What makes it on a headline is something bad, something violent, something that will what? Induce fear, okay? And so you have to remember that the big media machine is a part of the old 3D matrix that is a part of the system that wants to maintain us in fear and in low vibration, that wants to maintain us unawakened. And so you have to wake up to that reality. And what that means on a practical everyday level is that you're going to limit the amount of information that you are consuming from this media machine. Because what will happen, and this happens every single time, so see if this has happened to you, because this happens to me sometimes, The energy is so powerful that sometimes when the war broke out in Ukraine, I was just going through CNN or going through any other site, and I started to read news. And the more that I would read the articles, and the more that I would skim through the headlines, and the more that I would read, 10 minutes and then 15 minutes later, I noticed that my vibration was getting heavier. I was starting to get worried. I was starting to go into fear. I was starting to panic. And I noticed immediately, I said, wow, like that's how powerful this media machine is at dipping our vibration, okay? So it's so important for you to limit the amount of information that you consume, especially if that information is coming from what's known as big media, okay? So these are corporations that are at the top of the food chain when it comes to releasing information. These are the big channels, the regular, what's known as mainstream media, all of the big companies that together have put together this media machine. This type of information, limit it very, very consciously. So there's a term that we use when we're talking about what the media machine does to our vibration by nature, okay? And it's called the descending energy vortex. I call it the descending energy vortex. And it means that if you notice, test this on yourself. If you don't believe me, test this on yourself and just go on to the main media websites and just start to read articles there from that front page. Start to read articles, and then you read articles, and then you read another one, and then you read another one, and then you read another. I would say like 5 or 10 minutes into it, you're going to see that your energy is being sucked into this descending energy vortex, which is pulling from you negative emotions like anger, rage, fear. You see, all of these kinds of emotions are emotions that the shadow realms and the 3D matrix feeds on, okay? And so the media machine is very good at pulling those emotions from us, getting us into this descending energy vortex, all right? So get good at spotting that stuff, all right? But I also wanted to leave a pro tip here, okay? So ding, ding, pro tip when it has to do with consuming information. Not only are you going to be very conscious of how much information you consume. So you're going to limit the consumption of it, because let's face it, if I wake up and I go on the website of, some mainstream media website and I read a couple of articles, that's about all I need to know about the news for that day, right? Like I don't need to read 2 hours worth of different articles or different videos from different media sources to tell me what the point of the situation is. Like I can read a couple of articles and I've got my news for the day, okay? I don't need to go down all this vortex, right? So yes, it's true. Limit it is a great way, but the pro tip that I wanted to leave here is to also diversify the information that you consume. This is so important, especially right now in the age of the cancel culture that's talked about a lot. We have become intellectually lazy. We've become people that we just live in our little information bubbles, and technology has really helped that happen. We live in these bubbles, and we only listen to information that confirms our biases already. So we basically only surround ourselves with information that agrees with us, okay? And it creates these silos of information, these bubbles. That is the prime of intellectual laziness. So diversify yourself. That's my pro tip. Diversify yourself. Expose yourself to opinions that you're not used to opinions that you may disagree with. That's how you keep your intellect at the top of the game, and you keep your heart open, because you're exposing yourself to different ways of different people view the world, okay? So for example, an example when it comes to information here. So if you want to, skim through, I do this every day. I'll skim through CNN, I'll skim through Fox News website, I'll skim through MSM. So you see MSNBC, you see I'm driving, I'm going left, I'm going right, I'm going all over the place. I go on YouTube, I listen to Russell Brand, if you've ever heard of him. He's got a thriving YouTube channel. He's got an amazing, he brings in different opinions, different guests. I listen to Joe Rogan sometimes, even though I disagree with some of the stuff that he talks about. I purposefully expose myself to opinions that I may or may not agree with, because I like to see how the world thinks. I like to see how other people think. And I like to be diversified in the information I'm consuming, so that I'm never stuck in a bubble and I don't become intellectually lazy. Okay, so this is an important tip for you. Another channel that, if you want, recommendations on things that I look at sometimes, another YouTube channel that I follow is called Unheard, UNHRD. Herd. I love the way they present news in a very simple way, so I'll listen to them sometimes. So although I'm limiting the information I'm consuming, I'm also strategically making sure that I'm consuming information that doesn't all agree with me, that kind of challenges me to stretch my way of seeing the world as other people may see it, okay? I've always done this even before my spiritual awakening, but after my spiritual awakening, being able to expose myself to diversified opinions even became more important, because as a teacher, our community is filled with people that come from all walks of life and have different political and ideological ways of thinking. And I wanted to make this community welcoming of everyone. And so I had to be able to understand what one person was thinking versus another, and I couldn't do that if I was intellectually lazy, okay? So get very good at popping yourself out of the information bubble of only being surrounded by what you agree with. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below, what tip are you going to be implementing to help decrease the chaos on the planet right now? I want to hear all about it. Click here to subscribe to my YouTube channel, or head over to my website where you can download my popular free guided meditations. And don't forget this YouTube Live, this group meditation that we did for Ukraine. You can still watch it afterwards. Okay, that's it for me. I love you, beautiful soul. I'm out.